Thank you all for having me. Thank you to the PyTexas organizers for having me. So my first talk was at PyTexas in 2013 in College Station. And I think my first conference was actually PyTexas in 2010. It was in Waco at the time. So it's nice to be here at another PyTexas, and also nice to be keynoting. So here on the slide, there are some details about me. So the talk is called Python Community Growth, and that's what I'll be focusing on. Since I've become active in the Python community, I have felt that one of the best ways that I can make a contribution to the community was by helping to grow the contributor base for the community. And so the first talk that I gave in 2013 was somewhat related to that. The content of the talk was more about sort of things you could do with Python and spreadsheets and how that could draw non-developers into the Python community. And then those people could become future contributors. So that's kind of been a running theme, sometimes a less obvious theme in the different talks and talks that I've done in my community activity. So currently I'm an engineer at RevSys. I'll talk a little bit about that more later. It's a Django shop and we do a lot of interesting things. Before I was a Python developer, I was an accountant and a university instructor and got an MBA. I taught accounting in English and other things in a couple different countries, well, 2 different countries, here in Texas and in China. And so once I decided the accounting businessy thing was not what I was going to do anymore, I made a transition into software development. So there are other things that I do as well, and you can see here on my slides my name and then also my Twitter handle, what's probably the best way to reach me. So among other things, I'm also a DjangoCon US organizer. I've done that since 2016. I'm also the DEFNA North American Ambassador. DEFNA is the Django Events Foundation North America. That is the nonprofit that is tasked with putting on DjangoCon US. One of the things that I do as the DEFNA North American Ambassador is to let people know, A, that DEFNA exists, because it's a relatively new organization. I think only been around since 2014. The 2015 DjangoCon US was the first DEFNA DjangoCon, and that was here in Austin. But the second key part of that is letting people know that DjangoCon US can take place in any North American city, and so the next time a CFP goes out, and I'll be reaching out to people when that happens, people from your city can put together a CFP and try to have DjangoCon US hosted in your North American city. So that is an important thing to know. DEFNATO, that's the Twitter handle for DEFNATO, or you can go to defna.org to get more information about the organization and what they do. So I talked about my company, RevSys, and one of the reasons I'm talking about this is because, and this isn't my company sponsored this type of talk. It's more a matter of, it relates to the content of my talk. We're a small company. There are 8 of us total. And then, so on the prior slide, I talked about some of the stuff that I do. So of the remaining 7 people, we have all these things. So the DSF founder and the person who helped make Django open source, so Jacob Kaplan-Moss, if you know that name. 2 former Django Software Foundation presidents, so Jacob Kaplan-Moss and Frank Wiles, who is the president of RevSys, and Kaplan-Moss is one of the other founders. 2 former DjangoCon US chairs, so 2 people who have chaired DjangoCon US in the past. One of the founders of DEFNA and its former president, Jeff, who is one of our partners. And Jeff is also currently one of the Python Software Foundation directors. And then there's Catherine. And so Catherine doesn't have sort of like a fancy title or whatnot, but over the course of the last, several years, Catherine has made a lot of things work in the background for DjangoCon US and for DEFNA. For DjangoCon US and for DEFNA and for the DSF. She's sort of our chief admin person at RevSys. And so at one point, the RevSys president was the DSF president, and so Catherine helped with a lot of the stuff there. And as members of RevSys have been working on organizing DjangoCon US, Catherine has also helped a lot of that stuff in with DEFNA. So, and I point these things out about my company because one of the reasons I work with this group is because we're all sort of the same mind or of a similar mind as far as community contributions and things of that nature. So one of the key points of the talk here is that Python itself and Django, which I'm fairly involved in the Django community, so that comes up a lot, but Django is itself written in Python, so Python is Django. Or Django is Python, but Python is Django. But both are open source projects. And what that means is that they are built by volunteers, people in their free time doing all sorts of extra work to make these things happen. But in a situation like that, more contributors are always needed. There's always more help needed. More people working on a project or on a process makes that process easier. More hands lighten the load, as they say. And so that's one of the reasons I've tried to focus on trying to grow the contributor base of the Python community. And it's important to note that contributions aren't just code. Often in a developer community, there's a tendency to think that if someone's going to contribute to Python or to Django or to something else, another project, that it's all just about writing code or adding new features and that sort of thing. Those things are useful, those things are important, but there's much more to it than that. Documentation and that sort of thing, conference organization, all the different legal issues that come up with defending the IP of both Python and Django and other things, fundraising. If you talk to any of the conference organizers, for instance, the people you see here in the orange shirts for organizing PyTexas, or if you attend a meetup in your local area, your hometown, if you talk to a meetup organizer, they will tell you that there are all sorts of things that need to be done. And so there are a number of different contributions that need to be made to the community, especially as Python has become such a large project. So there are lots of things that are needed beyond just code. And so you need help. There's more help that's needed. But then the question is, where is that help going to come from? So when you look at people who might be actual contributors, you have two necessary conditions for potential contributors. One is they have to be people who find some value in Python, people who actually use Python and find some value in it. I'll probably just use the term Pythonistas throughout my talk, but anybody who uses Python and gets value from it and realizes, hey, this is good, like this helps me, this is of some benefit. But then the second condition, which is a little more the focus of this first part of the talk, is that those people actually have to feel like they're included in the community. They have to feel like they're members of the community. So and this is important, these two necessary conditions. The first condition is necessary but not sufficient, in the mathematical parlance. Someone can use Python and get all sorts of benefit from it, but they don't have to interact with the rest of us. They don't have to actually make any contributions to the Python community if they don't want to. They can just use Python, benefit from it, and then go on about their day. So that second part, that a potential contributor has to feel like they're a part of our community, is very important, and I think that's someplace where we can make some improvement. So when we look at people who use Python, we've got this, what I call the Python use spectrum. And so this talk, I'm sort of one of those people who's always kind of working on talks and that sort of thing. So I guess I probably started working on this talk in 2013, technically. I mean, the ideas draw from that. But certain chunks of it come from a keynote that I gave at PyGotham in 2019, and that talk was focused more specifically on the Python use spectrum. I'll be mentioning some things from that here in this talk, and you can find that PyGotham 2019 keynote. It's on YouTube if you want sort of more details about that specific area. But this idea, to me, is important because you have a wide range of people who use Python. And so I've created this sort of spectrum to describe them. So on one end, you've got programming. Was it my left, your left, also your left? Mirrors are hard. So on the left, you've got programming, and on the right, the far right, you've got software engineering. So these are the uses of Python. And everyone who uses Python, no, they're there. All right, so everyone who uses Python in some way or gets some value or benefit from Python falls somewhere in this spectrum. And so here we've got some definitions. So what these look at are the different ways that people use code. So first bullet point, so who writes the code? For programmers, usually the code is written by individuals. Software engineering, the code is often written in teams. Who's using the code? In programming, it's often just the author. Someone's writing code for themselves, so the author of the code is using it. In software engineering, you're usually writing code to be used by other people, not the individual people who write the code themselves. When does the code run, or how is it run? In the programming context, you probably got somebody who's writing code that is being run while they're looking at it. The code's being run with supervision. And in the software engineering context, the code is designed to be able to run in isolation. You don't want to have to write code and then deploy it and then just sit and watch it and make sure it works. In the programming context, the primary product is the output of the code. And so if you're writing code for yourself to run with your supervision, you don't really care about the code, you care about the output of the code. Whereas in the software engineering context, the code itself is the actual output, that's the actual product. And then your motivations, why you're writing this code. In the programming context, you're writing the code for utility. You're writing code that will do something for you, and that's your primary concern. Whereas in the software engineering context, you're writing code because that's your profession, that's your job. And so again, look back at the spectrum, and everyone who uses Python falls somewhere along the spectrum. Some people start at the programming end and stay there because they don't have any need to go any further. Other people, well, everyone starts at the programming end, but some people aspire to get to the software engineering end and stay there and to advance their skills there. But again, everyone who uses Python falls along this spectrum. So the big problem that I see is that our community culture is heavily biased towards software engineering. And that creates an issue where software engineering, that approach is seen as like the only way to actually do programming, the only way to actually write code, the correct way to write code. And that is true in some cases, but for other people who have different contexts, you don't need all of the software engineering tools and accoutrements and details that software engineers use. So why is that important? This bias towards software engineering often manifests itself as a bias against programming. And again, our community culture is often very heavily influenced by the software engineering approach. And as we've seen, Python has grown very quickly in data science, and data science probably the biggest, sort of most noteworthy area of growth. But there are lots of other areas where Python has grown that aren't software engineering. There are lots of people who aren't data scientists and don't think of themselves as data scientists, but they found that Python is helpful to them. The syntax is clear and straightforward, and people have found, oh, I can use this code to make my life better, and I can write 5-10 lines of code, and it makes something better for me, and I can just go on with my day. But again, a lot of our community culture is heavily slanted towards software engineering, and that's as if that is the one true way to do things. And so, all three. So we've got these different people who are using Python, and they could all be potentially contributing to software engineering. So these people who exist along the spectrum, anyone along the spectrum could be contributing to Python, but because of the software engineering bias, we often end up pushing away people who aren't actually software engineers. But the software engineers aren't a small portion of the community, but software engineers are no longer as large a percentage of the community as they once were. And that's really kind of a good thing because Python is so helpful to so many people who aren't, who don't think of themselves as real programmers or professional. I don't want to get a degree in computer science and blah, blah, blah. Well, no, you don't have to. You can automate the boring things with Python, or you can find a blog post or two that will let you solve a particular problem that you have in Python. And so you don't need testing and CI and Docker and Git. You might not need any of those things. You can just write your 12 lines of Python or your 150 lines of Python, and ta-da, problem solved, and go on and live your better life. And so the issue is we are sometimes pushing non-software engineers away from the community. So we go back to those two conditions of people who can contribute, people who find value in Python, and people who feel like they're members of our community. Well, if we've got people who are using Python that we're pushing away from the community, then we're minimizing our contributor base. So one of the things that stood out to me, in PyCon 2019, RKM here, this is Russell Keith McGee, a former Django Software Foundation president and someone who has done a lot of work in the area of open source sustainability and trying to sort of figure out how do we make open source development a sustainable thing, how do we keep it going and moving. I've got some screenshots here from his talk, but the talk covered a number of different things, but the things I'm going to focus on here are how do we get more support, more contributors for our community. And so two of the things he points out here are, you can pay professionals to support the project, and you also want to try to build a team with contribution skills or beyond code. So the earlier slide that I had where we talked about some of the different things, the different types of contribution that are needed beyond code, there's some situations where you can pay people to do that stuff, people who have those skills. And you also, but again, in building this team of contributors, you want to bring as many people with those different skills into our community as contributors as possible, not just developers. So I'll go through these sort of a little quickly, but these are screenshots from Russell's talk in 2019. Money makes things happen. Expertise costs, and so if you want people who know how to do conference organizing or fundraising or the different legal things that are needed to make the PSF or the DSF or DEFNA valid nonprofit so that people can contribute to them, or any sort of marketing information or what have you, people who have that expertise want to be paid for that expertise. Project management, UX, UI, UX design, all these other things that are related to any sort of software project but aren't just directly writing code, who organize the events, legal advice, all these sorts of things. So who does all this stuff? We need people who do these things. This last point, who makes strategic deals? I know over several years there has been a fundraising thing with Humble Bundle to help raise funds for the PSF. Well, someone had to make that deal. It might have been a developer, but people with CS degrees or people who are professional software engineers aren't always the best at peopling or doing strategic business deals and things of that nature. There's a difference between code optimization and fundraising and making strategic business deals. So those people are needed. And another important point here is that these people who have these different skills, let's just say that money fell from the sky and Google decided to just give the PSF $100 million to do, let's just say $500 million, just a big number. A whole bunch of money to do whatever the PSF wants. Well, these skilled professionals, they have options. They can work, with other people, and so, the PSF's 100 million is the same as another people's 100 million, and so why would I work with, this set of people versus that set of people? And this goes back to the idea of the conditions you need for people to be contributors. People who are getting value from Python, and also people who feel like they're members of our community. And so if you have people who have these skills that we need and are members of our community, and they feel like they're members of our community, then when there's a choice of, okay, well, I can get paid $100,000 a year to do this thing for Python or to do it for Apple, well, I'm a Pythonista. I'll take the PSF's 100,000, and I'll keep my iPhone and use my Apple stuff, but I'm going to go work with these people because I'm part of that community. Those are my people. I'm going to work with them. And so this idea of making sure that we are including potential contributors in our community, it resonates because it's something that sort of makes decisions as far as how things happen and how things don't happen. So how do we make this happen? This idea of making sure that we're including people in our community and making them feel that they're members of the community. So here we get into the sort of the scoldy portion, slightly scoldy portion of the talk. The idea of senior engineers needing to be better. So in many cases, I talked before about the Python spectrum and how software engineering tends to heavily influence our community culture. So within that, our more senior software engineers tend to have an even larger influence on our community culture. Some of that is because they are the people, when people come in and they're looking for expertise on, oh, well, how do I do this thing with Python, or how do I make Python do what I want, they will often try to, you would want to talk to an expert. You wouldn't want to talk to a novice, you would want to talk to an expert. And so those are often the first people they interact with. But then the other issue is, as we have new software engineers even coming into the community, like more junior software engineers, those people are going to be influenced by the senior software engineers that they work with. And so you've got this sort of outsized impact that the more senior software engineers have on our community and the community culture. And as such, since they're having an outsized impact, they also bear a larger burden of responsibility as far as improving our community culture and helping to make sure that we can have as wide a range of contributors as possible. And with that, we start to look at our local communities. And so the reality is, when people encounter Python for the first time, they're much more likely to encounter Python or the Python community at a local meetup than they are, say, like at PyCon or PyTexas or DjangoCon US. So to use an analogy, that might not seem flattering, but is accurate. Local meetup organizers are basically sort of like the Walmart greeters of the Python community. Again, for many people, the first time you actually encounter another Pythonista is going to be at a local meetup. Now, you can just go to python.org and download Python or whatever, or you can use the package manager on your distro of choice, or you can use Homebrew on your Mac or whatever. You can download Python and use it without talking to anybody. But if you actually want to get some help with Python and interact with other Python people, you're probably not going to think, okay, I'm trying to write this Python program. I used to be an accountant, so I'll use a spreadsheet example. I'm trying to write this Python code that will import this stuff from a spreadsheet and process it. How do I do that? I'm going to go to PyCon US and ask somebody. That's what I'll do. That seems like the best way. Well, no. Unless you happen to live in the city where PyCon US is happening, this year, Salt Lake City, you're probably not going to do that. You're probably going to look for your local Python meetup and talk to someone there and get some help from some of those people. But the people who organize our local Python meetups are generally often our more senior engineers. Like, there are very few people who started learning Python like 3 months ago and decided, I'm going to organize a Python meetup. That's, it could happen, but it generally doesn't. It's usually done by people who are more experienced Python developers. So our senior engineers are often the people who organize these local meetups, which are the first point of contact with non-Pythonistas and the Python community. And as a result, those senior engineers often shape this culture that happens in these meetups. So what's happening in your local meetups? Are you having a space that is like a cool place for other senior Python developers to hang out? Or are you creating a space where new people are welcomed and included in the community? So finding a space and having a speaker and finding food, I mean, like, those are all great things at a meetup. Literally everybody likes to go to a meetup where there's food. That always works out well. But there's more to it than just that. And there is sometimes a tendency to maybe optimize the meetup more toward, and you get a certain amount of unconscious bias. There's a tendency to sometimes optimize the meetup where you as a senior Python developer are comfortable, and other senior Python developers that are also comfortable in this space, and people who aren't as senior might feel left out. Excuse me. People who aren't senior might feel left out, or people who aren't even trying to pursue a software engineering path might feel left out. People who just want to use Python to solve their individual problems. But again, these local meetups, our local community activities, are the first contact with the rest of the non-Python community, and those community cultures tend to be shaped fairly heavily by Python senior engineers. And so so more of this burden of responsibility falls on these people. And it's important to try to make sure that your meetup and your meetup culture is as welcoming as possible, because otherwise we'll miss out on a lot of new potential contributors. So we've got sort of new criteria for senior developer. It seems like traditionally or in the past, senior developer was seen as someone who writes really good Python code, or someone who knows how to architect software and has all sorts of advanced Python skills and abilities. And that's important, but I'll add a few more points here. As a senior developer, you should be someone who's able to advance the skills of a more junior developer. And if you're someone who thinks, well, I'm a senior developer because I can write Python really well and I can architect these things and write really complex software, I don't need to interact with your more junior people or help them advance. That's the intellectual equivalent of, well, it works on my machine, which I think we have all learned is really an anti-pattern. So especially as a software engineer, because if it works on your machine, well, the whole point of the code is to have it work somewhere else. So that's, you're sort of doing yourself a disservice. It might seem like a good thing, but it's not really working in your favor. So instead of a senior developer being, I'm using developer and engineer interchangeably here, instead of a senior developer being someone who just sort of is able to write code really well on their own or interact well with other senior developers, another necessary criteria of a senior developer is that you should be able to help advance the skills of a more junior developer. And if you can't or won't do that, you might need to senior a little bit better. So that's something to consider. But also, a senior developer should be able to retain junior developers as they advance. So if you're in a situation where, and I know some people will think, well, hold on, Kojo. I'm a software developer. I'm not HR. I'm not like the chief people person or whatever. But hear me out. If you are someone, you're working with more junior developers and you're helping them advance their skills, but then once they're advanced, they're like, okay, like I've dealt with you as long as I can. I've got to get away from you. Are you really senioring well? And so if you're not doing both of these things, if you're not helping the more junior developers around you advance, but you're also not creating an environment that they want to stay in and that they want to, to continue to be a part of, you may need to reconsider some of your senioring options. This comes up especially in light of the talk that we hear about so many people, sort of the shortage of software engineers and people not being able to find enough software engineers and I can't find a good developer and that sort of thing. One of the simple solutions is, well, if you can't find quote unquote good developers, perhaps make a good developer. And if you are not able to help a less experienced developer become a better developer, maybe you're not as senior as you thought. Those are the parts that nobody really likes to hear, but the truth is what it is. This last point here is unless money. So if you're a senior developer and you're helping advance your junior developers and you're getting to a point where if you've got a senior developer here and a junior developer here, they should be moving to a situation where they're becoming more of a peer. And this is, I think, should be one of the goals for a senior developer. Now, if someone shows up and says, oh, semi-junior developer, or former junior developer, I see you now become a senior developer, and you're being paid X. I will pay you 1.5X. Well, a lot of people are going to leave you in that situation. It's not personal. But if someone shows up with a truck full of money, people may leave your organization. So, regardless of how good a job you're doing at helping your juniors advance or helping them, creating a positive culture for you, if someone shows up and just throws bags of money at them, they're going to leave. You don't take that personally. You've done your job as a senior well, if that happens. Let me rephrase that. You have done your job well as a senior if you've had a more junior developer join your organization, they have advanced their skills in your organization, and then someone comes and throws like a small bag of money at them, and they're like, no, I mean, like that's cool, but like I'm going to stay with my people because I've learned here, I've grown here, I enjoy where I am. So for 1.1x, I'm not going anywhere because I like my team, I like my people. I know I'm going to get better here. 1.5x, I might leave these people. 2x, well, yeah, you might have to go. And so if you've done your job really well as a senior developer, your more junior developer advances. Somebody offers them 2x, and they're like, okay, I'm leaving, and Andy's coming with me. And so because we're both going to get 2x. So, but these are, I think, things that are that our more senior developers should be considering, partially to help improve the community culture, but also these more junior developers are also people who are in that potential contributor pipeline. And so the more their skills advance, the more they're able to become, the more likely they are to become potential contributors because they're already invested. They already understand the value of Python because they're working in the field, and they already feel like a part of the community. But as their skills advance, they're better able to contribute. But then they are also able to become those people who are closer to the senior end of the spectrum, who are more experienced developers, who are able to help shape that community culture. So now instead of you being solo senior developer who's trying to senior better, now you've brought along someone else now you have another senior developer or another more senior developer to help you with those things. So you ease the burden on yourself. So instead of me just saying, instead of me just saying, senior better, and, hey, senior developers, get better, I tried to offer some, there's an idea that I have, and this is something that I discussed with my own team. It's one of the reasons I talked about my team so much earlier. One of the things that I discussed with my team, so I'm the newest member at RevSys, and I am probably our least experienced developer. And so there's a lot of back and forth as far as transferring information from my more experienced team members to myself. So I have like a weekly meeting with our president just to sort of ask questions and discuss things of that nature. But one of the things, two things that have come up really, this solution to an unknown problem. One of the things that junior developers often run into is that a senior developer will say, okay, we're going to use this. We're going to use this tool and just use it. And the junior developer doesn't understand why. The reason the senior developer is using that tool is because it is solving a problem that the senior developer has run into, but the junior developer has never encountered. And so this point about junior versus senior, the difference between, and this is the key difference between a senior developer and a junior developer. That's the difference. A senior developer has bumped their head against problems that a junior developer has never encountered. And at some point, they've bumped their head against them enough where they've had to either devise a situation or devise a solution or find a solution or come up with some set of processes. But the junior developer, having never seen that problem, doesn't understand what this is or why are we doing all this sort of extra complexity. So simple, well, maybe not simple, but some of the more common or obvious examples would be things like version control, like Git. Like why do we need that? Why can't I just save my file in, Kojo.py, and then Kojo_2.py and Kojo_3.py. Like why, it worked for spreadsheets. It works for other stuff. It worked. I got through college like that. All of my papers. I have a master's degree in English. I know all about Shakespeare. That worked for me there. If it's good enough for Shakespeare, why isn't that good enough for you people? Why are you so fancy? What's the deal? So version control is one example. Docker. A lot of us use Docker now because it solves this issue of both dependency management and deployment. But as a more junior engineer, you haven't had to face those problems. You haven't had to run into that sort of thing. And so again, just this issue of having bumped your head against things, this is one of the key differences between a more senior developer and a more junior developer. And so I point this out because I feel like, and this is the thing I talk about with my teammates, I feel like this idea of understanding that you may be presented with a solution to a problem that you yourself haven't encountered. By understanding that concept, you can start to look for, okay, well, what is that problem? What is this thing that you bumped your head up against that I haven't, that you're now presenting with a solution for? And then this is something that definitely helps a more junior developer become a more senior developer. And so maybe you don't have to bump your head against that same thing as many times, but if someone else can explain to you, okay, look, like if you go that way, in our job, we're going to be going that way and out these doors a lot. You're going to run into the door is going to be locked. You're going to run into the door is going to be locked. What you need is something that will tell you if the door is locked before you get to it, and then you know to make an adjustment. But this idea of understanding that there are solutions that you might be presented with that are solutions to problems you haven't encountered is something that can help a more junior developer move towards the senior end of the spectrum. And then understanding, okay, understanding some of the different permutations of that problem. Because inevitably, again, for those of us who work in software, you know that software doesn't always work, or a thing that works now might not work tomorrow or next week or what have you. And so if you're presented with this solution that you don't really fully understand, you don't even understand the problem it's addressing, when something goes wrong with that solution, which inevitably it does, then you have no idea of how to debug that thing because it's solving a problem that you don't even know exists. So senior developers can use this context to try to make things clearer to more junior developers as they're helping them advance their skills. But more junior developers can begin to ask these questions and realize, okay, like we're using like Playwright. I just watched Andy's tutorial on Playwright. It's an end-to-end testing tool. Why are we doing this? Like don't we already have, like Python has like unit tests built in. Like why aren't we just using that? Or the PyTest library. Like why are we installing this other library for testing when like we already have, there's already unit testing built in. And then sort of, so a junior developer asking these questions, and then a more senior developer helping explain and provide this sort of context. This last point here is that advancing skills is not equal to hand-holding, and I point that out because in my role as the DEFNA North American Ambassador, and I'll get into some of the details about that. That's sort of the fun part of the talk, hopefully later. I've attended my own local meetup in Houston, Raleigh, but I've also attended meetups in at least 3 different countries and in lots of different U.S. cities. And I've seen and heard lots of things said. And one of the recurring things that I've noticed is this idea of like, well, we need to hire senior devs because I don't have time to hold anybody's hand. Well, one of the problems with that is you have this situation of like, I need someone to, I need entertainment for my kid's birthday party. I hope Beyonce is available or Taylor Swift. What? So one, they're probably not. 2, if they were, like, do you have enough money for those people? They'd probably rather play some big venue than at your kid's birthday party. And then 3, you're not really that important. You don't really need like a Beyonce or a Taylor Swift. What you just need is someone who is competent. And so this again gets back to this idea of senior developers and junior developers, and helping more junior developers advance their skills and improve their abilities. So, but I've heard the language of hand-holding being used a lot as if like, it's going to sort of slow me down. I don't have time to sort of teach somebody this or that or the other thing. And look, I'll just say this clearly. If you are in a situation where you or your organization have always been able to find all the fully qualified software engineers you want, fantastic. Ignore me. I'm just some weirdo just saying weird stuff. But I have heard more than enough times that, the complaint about not being able to find good developers, not being able to find enough developers, and I feel like this is some of the solution. All right. So we have sort of ended the sort of the scoldy portion of the program, where I tell you to do better, and I tell you to do better, one, because you should, but importantly, by you I mean we, because I'm including myself in that, but also because I have been fortunate to meet a number of people throughout the Python community and the Django communities who have made lots of contributions, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and a lot of these people have helped me directly and indirectly. And so at some point, some of it is just sort of a personal thing of, okay, I've got friends, and my friends are kind of overloaded. Like, developer burnout is a real thing. We often hear about how people who are maintaining various open source packages that we all need and use and love are considering stopping that work because it's just too much, there's just too much effort happening. And so at a very personal level, like, I have friends who are being overloaded and burnt out, and my friends need help. And the people who can help my friends are other of my friends. And people in this room and other members of the Python community. And so by doing this sort of thing, we can make life better for the people who are making and building these tools for us, but also we can make sure that these tools continue to be around. So things like new Python releases or new Django releases, or things like PyPI, which is just magic. Like, you can just, it's like a magic shopping list. Like, okay, I'm going to make a requirements.txt file. I'm just going to type in all the things I want. I want this, and I want that, I want this package, I want that package. And then you just run your code, and then just all the things you want just magically show up on your computer, or they just magically show up wherever you deployed stuff. That's PyPI. That doesn't happen just because hopes and dreams. That happens because like people like E. Durbin and like Dustin Ingram, who used to organize PyTexas, and various other people like actually make that happen, put in the work and the effort to make that happen, but also money is required. And the money doesn't just fall from the sky either. Someone has to go find the money. So these are all these reasons that helping to grow this contributor base is important, because if we want to be able to continue to type our magical shopping lists of Python and have those magical shopping lists be, Amazon fulfillment and next day delivery is all fantastic, or Amazon Now in 2 hours, PyPI is faster. And it makes you money. So if you're in a situation where you're getting paid money, to write Python, we need to protect these tools and these ecosystems that allow us to do what we do and what we enjoy. So that's that section of the talk, the idea of what are the things that we can do to try to grow the contributor base from that perspective. Now, the other side of that coin is that even if you are a more senior developer and you don't think that you yourself are, maybe you're not sure about getting more involved in things of that nature, I feel like there are benefits to be had by developers of all ranges, all skill and experience ranges, from more senior to more junior, or people along the Python spectrum, from programmers to software engineers. We can all benefit from more community engagement. And so you can do it, as the bullet point says. So this hashtag here, NORMGT, this is what I call the North American Grand Tour. So this is what I have done as the DEFNA North American Ambassador, speaking at conferences, and while speaking at conferences, speaking to those conference organizers about the idea that DjangoCon US can come to their city, but it has also allowed me an opportunity to meet people, to meet Python developers from all over the country, all over North America, and in lots of other parts of the world. It allows me to see what people are doing with Python. So I live in Houston. In Houston, we have the oil and gas industry and also the world's largest medical research center. But there are lots of other places, lots of other industries in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world. People are doing all sorts of interesting things with Python in these different places. And so my pitch here for this part of the talk is by being more actively engaged in the community, by actually sort of getting out and meeting the other Pythonistas in other places, you can find new opportunities, meet new friends, but also if you are looking to hire people, if you're looking to hire, again, back to the idea of, oh, it's hard to find quality senior engineers, the truth of that statement is almost always that when someone says that we can't find good developers, what it almost always means is, I live here, and I said to myself, I want a good developer. No. Well, I couldn't find any good developers. Well, yeah, they probably all don't live at your house, or they're not all in your city. They don't all come to your city's local Python meetup. But if you go to different conferences, meet different people in different places, now you've expanded your network. You can eat more food, which is always nice, and you can take your family places. That's always cool and interesting. So by being more actively engaged in the community, you can expand your scope and do different things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some more operational things here. I'm not going to just say go do more stuff and then not try to help you. Know how to, just like when I said senior better, I was going to just say senior better and then just be like, okay, well, good luck figuring that out. I try to at least offer something that I felt would be helpful. So here, how do I go about this? Where should you go? How do you make it work? What do you do if your job's not going to reimburse you for it? So again, I work at RevSys. RevSys has sponsored PyCon and DjangoCon for I don't know how many years. And so when I go to those things, I'm not worried about my company reimbursing me. When I started the North American Grand Tour, I was working for a different company and that wasn't the case. So I had to figure out some things. I had to bump my head against some things of, okay, well, how do I as one person fund a tour of North America out of my own pocket? How do I make that happen? So I'm going to pass some of those lessons along to you. And so now we get into sort of the free and loose part of the talk. So you go to the internet. I'm going to start with talking about your local Python meetup. And so again, when I talk about sort of community engagement, where to go, the first logical place to start is, does your city or town have a Python meetup? And if so, go to that meetup and meet those people and talk to those people. Now, if you get to your local Python meetup and it turns out, oh, well, yes, we have a Python meetup, but it's a Python meetup of senior Python developers who are really only interested in hanging out with other senior Python developers, and I don't really feel like this is, a place for me, well, then go to some other places and meet some other Pythonistas. I would say of my circle of Python friends, a lot of them now aren't just in Houston. My circle of friends is people sort of all over the place, and and we all have the internet, and so we can all talk to each other and stuff, and so that works out just fine. But so that's the first place I would say go. Try your local Python meetup, see how that goes. Another nice thing about that, especially if you are a newer Python developer, and I'm passing these things along to people who may be already more senior developers, but then I was talking to Jeremy, one of the PyTexas organizers, about this. If you are in a situation where you are a more senior developer and you're in a position to advise more junior developers as far as how can they advance their careers, how can they improve their skills, these are things you can pass along. So making them aware of some of these different opportunities. So if your local Python meetup, and maybe it's meeting your needs, maybe it's not, but it doesn't hurt to expand and try some other things. So what I would look at next would be the wide range of regional conferences. And so this is where we're just going to go to the internet and start looking at stuff. Let's see. So and let me open a map here. And just from a very practical standpoint, okay. So we've got a number of different regional conferences that are available. And since we're here at PyTexas, we're here in Austin, I'm going to sort of start basically sort of physically geographically. The two sort of physically closest conferences that one could attend, I believe, are PyColorado, which happens in Denver, and I think there's only been 1 year PyColorado. I missed the first year, and then PyTennessee, which is in Nashville, which has happened for many years. And so, let's see. Here's a website for PyColorado. So PyColorado, PyTennessee, PyOhio, also not as physically close, but also a very high quality conference. PyOhio has the distinction of being a free of charge conference, so that's always nice. And so there are a number of different regional conferences that you can attend. These regional conferences tend to be less expensive. So let's see, I'll note the comparison I'm making. Sort of the gold standard, kind of what, like, if you were going to go to a conference, people often would think, I want to go like to PyCon, PyCon US, or maybe PyCon with EuroPython or PyCon Australia, something like that. But those are larger undertakings and can be maybe more difficult, more expensive to attend, just because of the larger nature. But there are a number of different regional conferences that are easier to get to. Often less expensive, often smaller. They generally tend to happen over a weekend, and so you're not worried about getting time off or getting vacation time or getting approval from a boss. So you can just go because it's a weekend. If you have a job where you can't just do what you want on weekends, then that's its own separate problem. I don't know that I can help you with that. Well, I have advice I can offer you. I'll do that offline, but changes can be made depending on your risk tolerance and what you want to do with your life. But the nice thing about a lot of these regional conferences is that, again, they're on weekends, they're more accessible, they're easier to attend, but you can also look at them from a standpoint of expanding your career opportunities and what you want to do with Python and where you might want to live at some point in the future. I know the past 2 years have been very strange, and no one has gone anywhere because things, but if so we're here in Texas now, but maybe you are someone who went to college at the Ohio State University. Well, that's where PyOhio is. It's on that campus. Or if you're someone who is considered, maybe you have family in Tennessee, or I'm very much a map person. So there's a lot of stuff here. It's sort of south of the Great Lakes. So PyTennessee is here in Nashville. Maybe people in Tennessee, maybe people in Ohio, maybe you'd like to know people in Tennessee or Ohio. One thing that I've noted is, like, at PyTennessee and at PyOhio, I've often met people from Indianapolis, from IndyPy, and from Chippy, the Chicago Python meetup, and from different parts of the country. And so, in addition to, let's say, if you go to PyTennessee, in addition to meeting people from Nashville, you'll meet people from the state of Tennessee, but also from other nearby regions that you might not encounter here in Texas. And the same with PyColorado or PyCascades, which is an international conference which rotates between the lovely cities of Vancouver and Portland and Seattle. And so if you're someone who has considered visiting the Pacific Northwest or living in the Pacific Northwest or looking at jobs in that area, attending one of those conferences can be a good way to do that. So again, sort of like the gold standard of conferences that people want to attend, something like PyCon, a PyCon US or DjangoCon US, but again, those are larger, more expensive. From having done NorMGT, I can tell you that often attending conferences, one of the biggest expenses is actually going to be your hotel. So there's the conference ticket. So you've got a few things. You've got a conference ticket, and then you've got travel, and then you have hotel, and then food. So depending on what you're doing, the hotel can be the most expensive portion of that because, especially for something like PyCon, this year's PyCon is slightly abbreviated because the development sprints are only going to be Monday and Tuesday. Usually the PyCon US schedule is, it will start Wednesday and Thursday. You have tutorials those 2 days. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the main conference with the talks. And then Monday through Thursday of the next week are the development sprints. The development sprints are a great thing to attend because, again, if you're looking at advancing your skills and, or if you're looking at even at, maybe not advancing your skills, but if you're someone who feels like, well, you know, my skills are good enough, but I would like to use those skills to contribute to Python more directly, the development sprints are a great way to do that, and then you can actually meet those people who work on those packages. You work on the core Python itself or core Django itself, or the other packages and applications that get used in those ecosystems. You can interact with those people, learn how those contributions get made, learn what needs to be worked on, build those relationships. But that time frame I described, from Wednesday of one week to Thursday of the next week, is a lot of time to stay in hotels. And hotels can be expensive. So if you look, like the PyCon, sort of the suggested PyCon US hotels have been, sort of ranged like in the $200 a night range. And you know, if you're wanting to, you know, go to tutorials and do all that sort of thing, from Wednesday one week to Thursday of the next week, it can be a lot of money, especially if your company is not paying for it, or if your company's not reimbursing you for it. One of the things that I have done, so there are a couple of ways to work around that. Let's say if you're looking at PyCon itself, PyCon US itself. One approach is to just go for the talk days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or maybe just go for the development sprint days. The nice thing about the development sprint to PyCon US is that they're free of charge, and so you don't have to, you know, even buy a ticket for those. And so you can go to those. But again, there's still, even if you were going to go to the development sprints, there's still the travel cost, and then you have to live somewhere, so the housing cost. One of the things that I've done on the North American Grand Tour is, you know, I've gotten good at sort of finding cheaper hotels. So there's this choice group of hotels and the Wyndham group of hotels, and they've got a range of different hotels that are at different prices. Now, I will point this out, that traveling is a multivariate problem. And so there are things that I, as a 6'5", very heavy, you know, large African-American man, like, I can go a lot of places by myself, and it's fine. I'm not worried about my safety. Now, there are other places. So let's see. If we look at my coworkers, and so this is Repsys, this is my team, and there's 8 of us. So there's Catherine, the aforementioned Catherine. So Lacey is one of my coworkers, a former DjangoCon US chair. Lacey is maybe 5'2". So Lacey, a much smaller female. And so there are places where I'm comfortable going by myself that maybe Lacey might not want to go by herself. And so the details, as far as how you travel and when and where you travel, will vary based on your individual preferences and risk tolerances, that sort of thing. I can tell you, as someone who has been in some less expensive hotels in places that might have seemed like, oh, this could be questionable, it has for the most part been fine. Well, actually, no, not for the most part. It has 100% of the time been fine. But again, I recognize that I am me, and people who might want to behave in antisocial ways, shall we say, might want to do that elsewhere, because you know, if you present yourself to me as a problem, you might now find that you have a larger problem than you wanted. So that is, you know, that's just sort of some of the reality of me. But so I will tell you this, for PyCon US, I'm actually going to PyCon US this year. And since I knew I'd be giving this talk and I'd be telling people, hey, go to conferences, this is fantastic, I wanted to sort of walk it like I talk it. So what I would have done if my company wasn't reimbursing me for some of the PyCon expenses, I would have had to try to find a less expensive hotel. And so what I actually did is I'm going early to PyCon. I'm going to, so I came, so that's kind of why the switch is here. I came to this choice hotel site, looked for, this is in Salt Lake City. I am arriving on the 26th. I'm arriving on the 26th because I made my travel reservations before the tutorials schedule was released. So I didn't know if I was going to want to go to tutorials or not. And so, but I wanted to be able to go to tutorials. So I'm arriving on the 26th, And then I'm moving to the conference hotels, which are more expensive, which my company's reimbursed me for. I'm going to check out of my cheaper hotel on the 28th, and then move into the conference hotel that Thursday evening, so I can be in the conference hotel for the talks Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday I'm going to leave the conference hotel and move back to a cheaper hotel. And so this is what I did. This is literally what I did. I'm not signing in. And so we've got hotels near Salt Lake City. I think I have them sorted by price. Yeah, sorted by price, low to high. So these are the cheaper ones. I know this one I looked at and I was like, like this is like 9.7 miles from destination. That seems like, from my experience, that seems like it could be far. So if we go to Salt Lake City, and actually, what we really want is the Salt Palace, which is the convention center. So here's the Salt Palace, and again, I have done this tour of the continent, so I have more map stuff in my head than most people probably should. But in looking at these, I saw, okay, this address, South 300, which is 9 miles from the destination. I saw 715 West North Temple Street, and so from looking at the maps, I know that West North Temple is near the conference center. And so, was it? Yeah, North Temple is near the conference center. So here's the conference center. Here's South Temple Street. Here's North Temple Street. So we've got, okay, a few blocks, North Temple Street, a few blocks north of the convention center. So let's take this address, put it into Google Maps, and see what it tells us. And it's 1.2 miles from the venue. And so there's a lot of Google mapping that gets done. So if you are price sensitive, then there's a little more research time that has to get, a little more research time that needs to go in. But again, this is literally how I've attended many different conferences around the world. Like this, I use this same process when I attended PyCon Australia. This is how I found my hotel for PyCon Australia. That was a little iffy. I ended up living on top of a karaoke bar, which was, was exciting, but maybe, but I also learned by being there that there was another sort of nicer hotel. This is like a block away, so maybe I'll stay there next time. Next time I'm in Sydney. But, so we have here, so this hotel, there's the train, the Green Line train, which is also the train that takes you from the Salt Lake City airport to the conference location. But this Green Line train will take you from that cheap hotel to the venue in 15 minutes. And that hotel is, even now, still $61 a night, as opposed to like $200 or $220 for the hotels that are very close to the conference, that are attached to the conference. So this is where I'll be Tuesday and Wednesday night, and checking out Thursday morning, and then I'll be back here Monday evening, and then leaving from there Tuesday. So, I know, so at some point there's like, okay, hold on, Kojo, we came to Pi, Texas, not to like Travel Planet, Texas, or this is, it suddenly turned into an episode of like House Hunters International, which is a good show. I mean, it's not a bad place to end up. But again, back to the idea of, if I'm going to say, well, hey, just, do all these cool things, I mean, well, yeah, it's fantastic if you are, if you have all the monies in the world, or, again, I work for a company now that sponsors PyCon, sponsors DjangoCon. I'm not worried about these expenses being reimbursed. That wasn't always the case. So I started speaking at Python conferences when I still worked as an accountant. And so I was definitely, footing the bill for that stuff myself. But then even in my first developer job, I was still having to deal with these costs out of pocket. And so again, just to sort of to put a very fine point on it, like if you were thinking about going to PyCon US this year, I'm 99% sure PyCon US is not sold out already. I think we talked about that last night. So you can still get a ticket to PyCon US, and you can stay at this $61 a night hotel. And again, I've stayed at Econo Lodges. I'm sure it'll be fine. Again, for me personally, it'll be fine. You can also come and stay here too. I'll be there. And so it'll almost, it's like 95% chance it'll be fine for you too, because if nothing else, I'll be there, for at least a few of the nights. So to try to provide some actual practical, actionable advice, it's like, well, if you were thinking about going to PyCon, but maybe you don't know if your company will pay for it or your company will reimburse you for it, well, this is a less expensive option. There's still the cost of the ticket. There's still the cost of airfare. I can't make those magic go away. Food is a thing that you can vary your food pricing, but see, PyCon Cleveland, I stayed in the 2018 PyCon Cleveland. It was the first PyCon Cleveland. I ended up being in Cleveland for like a week and a half, maybe longer, because I did training in Chicago for a thing, and then I came from Chicago to Cleveland. I got to Cleveland like Sunday night, and so I was in Cleveland from like Sunday of one week until like Wednesday of the next week. But I was staying at a hotel like this, and so even though it was all mostly coming out of my pocket, and I got reimbursed for some of it, but those costs that had to be reimbursed weren't outlandish. So again, trying to offer some sort of practical advice here. So I mean, there are so many choices. PyTennessee is only one of them. There are many other conferences that you can look at. So in conclusion, I know this talk was kind of 4 different small talks tied together with this one cohesive thread. Hopefully the cohesive thread was that we need as many new contributors as possible in our community, because there's lots of work to be done, and the amount of work that needs to be done grows as Python becomes more popular. My concern is that Python's popularity and use is growing at one rate, but the contributor base is growing at a slower rate. And so I'm not going to try to make a graph in person. So trying to make this line, this bottom line, so to come closer to this one, that's the goal. So who needs graphs on slides? You have hands. Why would you do that? So again, trying to add as many new contributors as possible, but again, only actual community members will contribute, people who actually feel like they're members of the community. And our current senior devs are the ones that have this outsized influence on our community, and so it's sort of an appeal to those more senior developers to recognize that with this impact on the community, there's more responsibility. As Spider-Man taught us, with great power comes great responsibility. Also radioactive something. Again, those developers help shape our community, and focusing on training and retaining the developers who are here that you work with is an important thing. And also, you go out, make new friends, meet new people, see new stuff. If you have any questions or comments, things of that nature, this is me on Twitter. This is probably the best way to reach out if you have feedback. Again, this is kind of a talk I've been working on since 2013, and I'll get new feedback and new information, and we'll update it and add it into some part of another talk. But that is my presentation, so hopefully it has been of some benefit to you and hasn't been too scoldy, so thank you all very much for your time.